Hello, Peppers. Let's get peppy. And we are here with Richard Cooke. Tell us who you are, Rich.
I'm an author and journalist and old compadre of Chaz.
And a Pep favourite, I've got to say. The commenters like you.
Really?
Yes, they do. You should probably be insulted by that.
I was going to say, let's see if we can do something about that. Prize off the limpets.
And I am Chaz Ciadello. I'm from a TV show called Planet America, which I don't think anyone who listens to this podcast actually watches, because a lot of my friends listen to this podcast and none of them watch the show. And none of them, even Dave doesn't watch the show. But you don't watch the show, do you?
No.
So no one watches the show. So I do need to introduce myself. There's ABC Planet America. There's on our Facebook page, you can watch the video of this, or you can see on YouTube. I wasn't at the show last week, and I was sick, which is the reason we didn't have a podcast on Friday. I ended up Zooming it in, which people really got into. People love seeing your kitchen.
Really?
Yeah, they love seeing your kitchen.
Didn't you use one of those backdrops where you had like the Statue of Liberty?
I don't have the technical capacities. I tried to use like a 1970s film clip style background, like sort of, just stars or something. But no,
wipe to enter.
I couldn't even do it. But for that reason, this podcast is going to be catching up a little bit on a lot of the stuff that happened last week, which I didn't get a chance to talk about. But as luck would have it, almost all of it is continuing to happen this week. So it's still very relevant.
There's a little bit less compression of the news.
Yeah.
I feel like we have a week's worth of news every 2 days rather than daily.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
which is good.
Fair. I think that's fair. Oh, look, it's great. It means that every now and then, every 8 or 9 weeks, we get to talk about policy, which is just fantastic. It's a whole new world.
But then nobody knows what the policy positions actually are.
Well, that's why they should listen to PEP. That's right. Talking about which, let's get right into it with I don't even know how the song goes, so I can't even pretend to dance to it. But Schmitty, just play the song. What time is it? It's policy time. That's our policy corner sting. I don't know how it goes, but apparently it's very good. I hope you guys liked it. And right off the bat, before we even talk about the bill that's about to be signed, I want to talk about HR1, the voting rights bill, because that was part of last week, and it's definitely part of this week, and it's going to be part of next week. We're kind of getting to a crunch with this. And I'll just set the scene quickly, and then I'll get you onto it, Rich, or about the issues. First of all, look, it's got a lot of stuff. It's got some great stuff, in my view, like number one, just nationalising federal election laws. That's a good thing. The fact that America has this piecemeal piece of shit system where every single state has their own laws, and they so desperately need an AEC. And it's and in particular, you look at the turnout over the last 3 decades, hasn't changed much. And during that period, you've seen it's improved, if anything.
It has.
Yeah, but during that period, there's just been endless attempts at what Democrats would call suppression.
Yes.
From Republicans, attempts to crack down on voter ID, attempts to crack down on early voting, whatever. And it's either had no impact or it's had so little impact it's been dwarfed by the increase in turnout. And just to jump in there, the key to that though is the conclusion I draw from that is not that none of this matters. It's just that where this matters is at a state level, not on the national level.
That's exactly right.
And so the problem you've got is not that across America all the voting is a mess. It's just in 1 or 2 or 3 states they're really doing a number.
Keep going.
Maybe 4. They're really doing a number, trying to do whatever they can to reduce the turnout. So just nationalising the laws would make such a big difference. It would stop the rogue state dead. Go on.
Well, this is what sociologists say and people who study elections. They say voter suppression doesn't work. Most of them say that anyway. And Republicans say voter suppression doesn't work, with the unspoken part being, believe us, we've tried.
Yes.
But you're absolutely right that where the rubber does meet the road is not at federal elections. At federal elections, you've got enough people that it kind of comes out in the wash. It's in elections you've never heard of that voter suppression makes the difference.
Yeah. Well, so just number one, just the fact they're going to try to nationalise these laws, I think, is a great step. Even if they were quite conservative on what they tried to do, just nationalising federal laws, I think, is a big step. The next thing, which I think would be enormous, is making Election Day a holiday.
Yes.
Oh my God, they need that so badly.
Yes.
Like all the early voting, all the mail-in voting, all those things are a function of the fact that Election Day is Tuesday and low-income workers can't get off work.
So the question is, if these reforms are obvious, why haven't they been done? And I think you've got to be careful when you look at something like a federal election authority of the kind that we have here and think, why don't they just do that in America? This is a country which sometimes struggles to make things like public toilets work, where, the post office becomes this incredibly contested terrain. So something as complex as a federal election authority, as open to abuse, as open to partisan kind of wrangling as this, I think you've got to be careful about thinking it's going to be wonderful. It's wonderful in theory, but how it's going to work in practice and how constitutional it's going to be in practice are another question.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to have an AEC, I think, purely for constitutional reasons. Yeah. But just the next best thing is to at least have some federal laws, which is why I embrace HR1 for that reason. Election Day holiday is a good one. Automatic voter registration. Oh my God, that would just solve so many problems. Automatic voter registration would be, and actually have it so you can opt out if for some reason you're so weird, you demand to not be registered to vote. You can opt out, but to have automatic voter registration, I think would solve. I don't think any Australians understand why America has this weird system where it's like a two-step process where first you have to qualify to register and then you can vote. So getting rid of that would be great.
And especially, I mean, we've spoken before about this, that even those bureaucratic hoops, often when you get to the point of, having to prove your identity, for example, which is the case in some states, even getting the piece of identity required to do that, if you don't have a driver's license or your license is suspended or whatever, can be incredibly difficult, especially in majority areas.
Which is exactly why automatic registration is so good, because if you do it right, you can tie it to, say, social security numbers, things where it's a lot easier for the government to provide identification for you than for you. It's like, if you have a situation where when you get a social security number, you also get a card, and that card is your registration card, and you can lose it and then get another one or whatever. Like, that would just solve so many problems, I think. It would certainly solve the voter ID thing as well. Yes. Because the whole problem with voter ID is not, I mean, assuming we're not talking about fraud here, the whole problem is that like you say, some people don't have driver's licenses. Yes. And then what do you use?
But if you're talking about the issuance of a federal government identity card...
I know where this is going.
...in the United States...
Yes.
Now...
Yes.
That's quite a steep gradient to push that policy initiative, I would say.
There's already an outcry about this. Or not that there is a card in this particular legislation, but once you have automatic voter registration, it's only a hop, skip and a jump.
Why don't they just, when you get a social security number, you have a small microchip implanted in the base of your brain, and then the government can send you a reminder to go and vote?
No, mate.
On a public holiday.
That's lovely, but I've got it. I've actually got it. When you were saying that, just something occurred to me. You have a card, but the card comes in the form of an automatic rifle.
Perfect.
That is your card.
Yeah. You mean a semi-automatic rifle?
No, I reckon go back to the 80s. Fully automatic rifle. They will go crazy for it. Anyway, So that's no one. Online registration, editing options. That sounds good. That you can change your address online.
Yes.
That's a nice thing.
Yes.
15 days, 10 hours a day of early voting at least, including Sundays, because in Georgia they're trying to get rid of Sunday early voting.
Is, just a shamefully that they don't even have a they don't even have a cover story for this.
No, they don't.
They haven't said a surprising amount of voter fraud happens on Sundays. They are just shamelessly trying to prevent black people from voting because black voter drives tend to be tied to Sunday church services.
Yeah. Look, it's fair to say I'm more generous when it comes to interpreting voter security measures than most.
Yes.
Because I understand where that's coming from, and I think, okay, that's okay. Having a secure election, that's a good thing.
Yes.
But like you say, that one, there ain't no justification. Banning the provision of water to people who are standing in lines for 4 or 5 hours. It's very hard to justify that. But that's also happening in Georgia. Well, they're trying to make it happen in Georgia.
Yeah.
We'll see if it does happen.
That's a throwback to the ancient practice of putting on feasts for people who voted for you.
But that's to provide water.
Well, that's what they're pretending that it is.
Yes. They're like bribery.
Yeah,
bribery
that's
through survival.
An 18th century practice called treating.
Sure. Well, yeah, it depends what kind of water. I'm shaking my little liqueur.
I'm treating right now.
That's right. Independent redistricting commissions, obvious. Obviously. So get rid of gerrymandering. Restoring voting rights to ex-felons, obviously. Forcing transparency of donations for super PACs and dark money organisations, obviously. These are all things which I think are good.
Yeah.
Right? Requiring the revealing of 10 years of tax returns for a presidential candidate, obviously.
Yes.
Requiring paper ballot records, prepaid postage on mail ballots. All those things I just described are in the legislation. And to me, anyone who has any good faith would say they are good things.
So
all of those things.
These all seem to be perfectly sensible, absolutely defensible, good faith policies which should have bipartisan support.
Yes.
So why aren't they going to work?
Well, to be fair, these aren't the only policies in HR1. And when you vote for something, you're voting for the whole lot.
Yes.
All right. And so, and we are going to get to that in a second, the politics of this, right? Because let me talk you through some of the other ones. Now, these are what I call neutral things, where I can see I don't think they do much. I can see why people might want them. I can see why people might not want them. Same day voter registration, online voter registration. Neither of them are relevant if you have automatic voter registration.
Yes.
Which is the reason I don't think they add anything. I can see why people would start going, I can see the potential for dodginess here. Personally, I don't think there would be dodginess with either of them because both of them exist in states already and there is no dodginess. Having said that, I don't think they're necessary and I think they create potential political issues without any practical issues.
Like postal voting has existence since when? Since the 19th century?
Yeah.
And suddenly we decided, or the Republicans decided, that postal voting was fraudulent.
Yes.
So the something pre-existing is no guarantee that people are going to accept it.
Well, like I said, I don't know why they need that there. Because if you've got automatic voter registration, it's not necessary.
It's just a bonus.
Yeah. Also, requiring disclaimers for every online ad and revealing how much was spent on that ad. I understand the theory behind that. I understand that obviously you want as much transparency as possible. Personally, I think that the ability to find out stuff is more important than having this squeezy little 1 second, very fast read, very fine print thing at the end of the day.
It'll be like what we have here, authorized by. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I don't think that will actually change anything. Yes. I think it should be searchable, so a journalist can find this stuff.
Yes.
In real time, but I don't think that it should be compulsory, which it is in this.
But it won't. It'll be like the pharmaceutical ads that you see in the US.
Yeah, have you seen those though?
I've seen more of them than you can count.
In a 1 minute ad, 40 seconds is a disclaimer.
And then they say side effects may include death.
Yes. Yeah, see, that's the only thing that could make a political ad more annoying, to just whack on a 40-second disclaimer.
Disclaimer, yeah.
But anyway, whatever.
Constipation and death.
Now, this is an interesting one. Like, public financing with a 6-to-1 match for donations less than $200. Mm-hmm. And the money comes, it's not from tax, it comes from a 4.75% fee on criminal and civil fines or settlements with banks and corporations that commit corporate malfeasance. That's a good bit of politics.
Yes.
This is one where I'd love that, but I personally think America's got bigger problems at the moment than the financing. In that, I know that sounds ridiculous because there's so much money in politics in America, but everyone's got the money.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that one sounds potentially, I'm not a lawyer, but that one sounds extra unconstitutional to me.
Yeah, look, there's certainly arguments being made about the constitutionality, but where I'm going to with all this, I mean, I might as well just spoil it at the end, is that, in my view, if you have a genuine crisis in democracy, and I think they do,
yep,
you just got to just do the stuff that's most important and swing for the fences. Swing as hard as possible. Whereas at the moment, I feel like they just crammed every single thought they've ever had into the one bill, and then they're not going to swing for the fences. They're going to go, oh, well, we got filibustered. What a shame.
Well, and then, if we move past your baseball analogy, and it is a good one, isn't this like when they used to do the old scripts for Happy Days, and they'd want to have one reference to someone being a virgin in it? And so instead they'd put in the word virgin 50 times.
Yes.
And then one of them would go to air. This is the kind of turtle hatchling approach, isn't it?
Why were they so desperate to get the word virgin into Happy Days?
Look, I don't know. It's a different time. But the point is, I think that they're expecting attrition. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
And that's why there's going to be some duplicate measures as well of the kind that you're complaining about.
Yeah.
Because they don't expect both of those to make it through.
Okay.
Joe Manchin is going to pull one of them out. Oh. Which one? You'll be pleasantly surprised.
It's like a game show.
Yeah.
And another one which I think does nothing is a constitutional amendment to end Citizens United. The Democrats are obsessed with Citizens United. There are so many legal reasons for all the fuckery that is financing in America. Citizens United will not change anything. So to me, that's please yourself. I don't care.
Yes.
And then banning voter ID unless you have an alternative without voter ID, which I think is fair enough to have an alternative. But for the reasons I just told you before, I personally would have my card that will never get up, which is provided by the government. Because that's the problem with voter ID. The problem that people don't have it. Yeah. So just make sure they do have it.
Let's call it Soros card.
Sure. Why not? Why not? Anyway, and then there's stuff which I think is terrible, which I've talked about at length on this podcast. Like, for instance, ballot harvesting is compulsory in it. When I say compulsory, I don't mean everyone has to ballot harvest. I mean every state has to allow ballot harvesting.
Yes, and so this is why this is where we run into the serious constitutional problems, right? Yeah, where the states, it says in the Constitution, depending on how you define it, that the states should be in charge of stuff like this. And that's why they've tried to produce these extreme arguments which say the states should be in charge of choosing their electors and can choose faithless electors, and there's nothing you can do about that, which is wrong. But it's more right than saying that this is constitutional. Yeah. Well, I don't have the exact constitutional phrase on hand at the moment, but basically the Constitution says the states are in charge of elections, but it does say Congress can pass laws to regulate the states for federal elections. Yes. It's very borderline what is going to be constitutional, what's not, especially when you have a 6-3 Supreme Court. Again, this is just going to. These are the kinds of Biden initiatives which are just going to founder on that majority. Yeah. But leaving aside the constitutionality, I personally just don't think, I've always hated ballot harvesting. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, I'm surprised you obviously haven't listened to the podcast because I talk about it all the time. Ballot harvesting is when a person takes an absentee ballot from someone else and delivers it for them. And the idea is that if you are, say, someone who is incapacitated, then say your family member could deliver it for you. I have no problems with that.
if you say your family member or a nominated single person or something can deliver it, nominated beforehand. But if you just say any Joe Blow can deliver any ballot for anyone, that's when you get hordes of union people and uni students going around door to door at nursing homes saying, they call it granny harvesting, saying, hey, it's election time. And I'm not saying that they actually fill out the form for them, but I'm saying that they obviously can pressure these people in ways that are not necessarily super democratic in order to vote the way they want and just get them out of their hair as much as anything.
Yes.
And so I just don't like opening up that can of worms. I should say, in those states, obviously they say you're not allowed to pressure them and all the rest of it, but it's very hard to prove. And so
It is.
I prefer to not open that Pandora's box.
And that's fair enough. Yeah. But for our purposes here, that is a constitutionally protected activity. So what are the state measures which illegalize it? How do they work?
I don't know. I don't know, to be honest. I would like to bullshit you, but I can't.
Well, this is when we're really down in the weeds, and there's just so many differences state to state.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's massive. Like in California, you can do basically anything.
Yes. I was hoping you'd know more about this than me because I don't know very much about this. Which state has the best voting practices, for example?
Oh, I can tell you without any doubt that Colorado is a shining example in all respects. And by the way, Colorado, the states that already have have no excuse mail-in voting as much as you want, who have had it for decades.
Years,
yeah. Those states have really cleaned up their house because one of the major problems they've got is the voter roll is a mess, generally speaking, in most places. But those states, because of the nature of them actually mailing out ballots to every single person, every single election, they've long since cleaned all this up and they've got maximum access with maximum security. And so places like Washington, Oregon, Colorado, Utah in particular, but Colorado is the most recent to the mail-in voting and they were pretty good even beforehand. So they're the states that tend to have the best processes, in my view. And they end up having the highest turnout as well.
Did Colorado introduce... There was a referendum there or something, wasn't there, which introduced some of these measures? Is that right?
Yes. They had a ballot question, yes.
Why did they do that?
Well, the theory of mail-in voting is that you increase convenience and you increase turnout.
Yes.
So it's good for the voter and it's good for democracy. That's the theory.
Is there something...
And I think it's true, by the way, if you do it right.
Is there something about Colorado geographically, culturally, politically, that this was an easier win there? Is it just that it's not part of the South and it doesn't have a massive minority population? I
just don't know. I just don't know. It does have a very high percentage of people with college degrees. That might be related. I don't know. It generally hasn't been a very partisan place for whatever reason over the decades. But that might be related. I'm not sure. But I will say that what this legislation doesn't have is any attempt to regulate how the vote takes place, like, say, preferential voting or multi-member districts. These are the things that actually would make the biggest difference in American democracy if you actually do that kind of stuff. But they're not even trying, I should say.
That's probably off the table for the foreseeable future.
Interestingly, was one I hadn't heard of until this week in St. Louis, in their mayor's race, they have something called approval voting. And how approval voting works is you put all the names in there and you can vote as many times as you want. You vote for on the one ballot, not you vote 100 times, but you can vote for more than one person. You tick, rather than putting numbers or something, you tick as many boxes as you like. The two people with the most ticks go into a runoff.
How bespoke.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting, and I'm a big fan of preferential voting, but I feel like there's a certain simplicity to that of just tick all you like, and then the top two winners go up against each other. It's not a bad idea, I think.
It's not a bad idea. Yeah, it's sort of like preferential voting with training wheels.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Anyway, but they don't have that in the legislation. Okay, so I've told you guys what's in the legislation now. So let's talk about the politics of this. Essentially, the Democrats are saying, and this is actually an argument being used by Amy Klobuchar of all people, who's one of the more moderate people in the Democrats. They're saying, look, the Republicans are doing whatever they can to try and stitch up the vote here at the moment. We can all see it. It's all obvious. Especially look at Georgia. It's really obvious what's happening. At the moment, they're not going as hard as they can down the road because they only control so many legislatures. Mm-hmm. But if they get unified government federally, then they're going to pass all kinds of laws about voting instantly if they can get away with it.
Crazy laws.
Yeah, if they can get away with it. And the more states they take over, and every state they take over that they pass their laws in are going to be that much harder for Democrats to win in, and it's going to be a situation where it's a ratchet that only goes one way. Yes. So even though at the moment we're basically only talking about Georgia and Arizona are trying to do crazy laws at the moment that are relevant to elections.
But there'll be a lot more because it's the only play they've got in some ways.
Yeah, well,
they have to use the Senate advantage in particular and the districting advantage to try and compound advantages in the House where they don't have the same advantage.
Yeah, and what the Democrats are saying is that, okay, this time it's Georgia and Arizona. Next time will be Pennsylvania. The time after that'll be Wisconsin. And before you know it, the Democrats, it's going to be basically impossible for them to win the House or win the presidency because the gerrymandering is going to be so severe in so many states. It's going to be basically... So they're portraying this as almost an existentialist threat. Mm-hmm. I should say, I think they are overplaying this big time. I don't think that's true. I think gerrymandering... I mean, look, gerrymandering I hate, obviously. Everyone who's not bad faith would hate gerrymandering. But you take this... For instance, I read a projection the other day where they were saying redistricting in 2022 will lead to five Democrat seats becoming Republican seats just by themselves for population reasons. Mm-hmm. Not because of gerrymandering, just for population distribution reasons.
Yep.
But then they're saying there'll be 3 more for gerrymandering. 3 more. Now, sure, add that up over a series of elections and that can become 3, 6. They might end up being 12 or 15 more. But you still see elections where there are 40-seat swings.
Exactly right.
So I think this idea of, the Democrats will never win an election again is just as ridiculous as Trump saying Republicans will never win an election again if we have mail-in voting.
This is a theme we've hit on a few times, where all this stuff about the permanent red map or the permanent Democratic majority, these things never pan out.
No.
There's always regression to the mean. There is a threat by these people, trying to, as you say, ratchet this advantage. But there's also a natural limit to that to a certain extent if it's a funcking democracy. That's the asterisk.
That's the if. That's right. Now, having said that, all because the Republicans can't push it past, say, a 65% chance that they're going to win. That's not a fair situation. No. So I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying, chill out with the Hitler's marching kind of rhetoric, and but at the same time we got a problem here, and I actually agree with the logic that Amy Klobuchar is saying. I wouldn't use the word existentialist, neither, but mind you, she didn't use it either. But I do think that it is true that if you're going to get rid of the filibuster, say, which is what they're talking about, that's a good reason to get rid of the filibuster, because you say if the filibuster is defending the degradation of democracy.
Yes,
that's a good reason to get rid of the filibuster to try and save the most fair possible outcome in elections. That's what they're saying. That's what Democrats are using, and this is the reason they're trying to pressure Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema at the moment to get rid of the filibuster to allow this legislation to go through. What do you think of that argument?
I think it's superficially persuasive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, the question, but it also seems to me to be, to some extent, separate from the question of should the filibuster be abolished or not. Mm. You know what I mean? Mm. Like, I think those two things next to each other are a mild non sequitur.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like the filibuster, but it's not because of this.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's kind of saying that there's always going to be some urgent piece of legislation, which is going to be the excuse to get rid of the filibuster.
Absolutely.
If it wasn't this, it would be something else. This is a kind of electoral procedure piece of legislation. But as you say, it's no more or less urgent than a lot of other things, you know. A massive stimulus bill preventing people from becoming permanently impoverished by coronavirus is very urgent and possibly, you know, democratically existential in another way. So it's always going to be something, you know.
Yeah. No, look, I completely agree. And in fact, my view on this, and it's actually, this moves in nicely to what's actually happened, the breaking news from yesterday about this exact issue, is that what I always say to this, to these kinds of questions is not, okay, I don't like the filibuster. I don't think it should be there because I think there's enough veto points in American democracy already.
Yes.
You don't need another one. So let's get rid of that. Every incentive in American democracy, American politics works against action.
Well, this is something that we're going to get to in the culture war section coming up.
We will.
Because I think those two things are intimately related.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
But what I say is, having said that, if you're going to have the filibuster, let's leave aside, let's separate the two questions for a second.
Yes.
If you're going to have the filibuster, what I do think is the ridiculous thing about the filibuster that's impossible to defend is the filibuster where someone just says, filibuster, and then they just all move on.
Yes.
That to me is impossible to defend. If you
think they should actually have to do it.
Yes, I think I've always thought they should actually have to do it. And then what that does is that, number one, that puts a price on both sides of the debate. If you are trying to crush the minority, you are going to have to pay in terms of weeks of your schedule in order to do that. That's I think that's good, because if you want to crush the minority, then it should be a good reason. And so that ensures you have a good reason. If you are the minority and you want to gum up the works of the Senate, then you have to physically work hard to do it. Fine. That's fine, because you shouldn't be able to just gum it up just for the hell of it. Right? So I like that as well. And sorry, just before you say, I think. And the third thing is that no one pays any attention to the Senate. If you start having talking filibusters, they'll pay attention to the talking filibuster. They're not going to sit there watching it like Big Brother, but they will be aware of the issue. That is the way of making the issue salient. And then if it's a bullshit issue for either side, then they are going to get slammed by public opinion. And so I want to make them have to fight in public opinion to try and win that debate. Sorry, you going, Rich?
I was agreeing with you all the way up to that last part, right? And this is, I think, the problem. I think if we were going back 10 years, your argument, make them do it, would absolutely work because there would be a penalty. But now, a filibuster stand is an audition for crackpot social media.
Fuck, you're right.
You're so right. It is a way to guarantee attention. There's no such thing as negative attention anymore.
Yeah.
There is only attention. And there are a large number of voters who think that just any sort of messing with the federal government, any messing with the function of the Senate, any messing with the function of Congress is great. Yeah, to the point of insurrectionary violence. Yeah. So those people for whom a filibuster will be tailored are going to love it.
Yeah, that is true. Although I was about to say, although there's only so many of them, but you're right. They are increasing in number, and this would actually place evolutionary pressure on them to increase their numbers.
Well, yeah, and you would end up
they would thrive.
Yeah, you're already seeing variations of that process now, with a kind of QAnon caucus of people who are not legislators. They've got more in common with YouTubers than they do with the politicians of the past.
Well, you know what? We're probably going to see this happen, because this is what Joe Manchin has said. This is the news. Joe Manchin has said, quote, "If you want to make filibustering a little bit more painful, make them stand there and talk. I'm willing to look at any way we can."
Interesting.
So the guy who's standing in the way of getting rid of the filibuster has said he's in favour of a talking filibuster. Now, he's not the only one. There are other Democrats, but I reckon that something like this is coming. Then I don't think they're going to. I think there's a lot of pressure building in the Senate, and I don't think the Democrats are going to just take it. I think they are going to try and change it somehow. They can't get rid of it because they don't have the votes to get rid of it, and I reckon this is as likely as any other way. But we'll see.
What we saw in the Obama years was that Republican voters will reward the most recalcitrant positions you can have. So surely the kind of end point of that is talking filibusters, where you can just eat away the entire parliamentary terms if you want to. You can take away the opportunity to pass anything at all, not even discuss it.
To be fair, though, that is no worse than the current situation. The current situation is, because at any point in time, you can just pull it, just like they do at the moment.
Yeah.
But at the moment, you have zero chance of getting past a filibuster, whereas now you at least have, in this scenario, you at least have a chance as long as you listen to Ted Cruz for the next 28 hours.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So I would say it's still better than the status quo, but I do take your point. There is a sizable negative side to that reform. I should say, just before we pass by too much, a couple of things I just want to add, which we've sort of passed by. First of all, when we're talking about the democracy thing and about, while I was saying to people chill out, I was saying there is one reason why people maybe shouldn't chill out, which is a lot of people have been drawing comparisons, and I think that they're not unfair comparisons to Hungary and Poland 15 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're saying like the, what's the guy's name? Orzag? The Hungary guy. Orban. Sorry, Orzag is a finance guy. Yeah, Orban. Yeah, Orban was originally a bit of a joke. Lost the election. Said it was all rigged. Said the whole thing was the whole of democracy was rigged. Came back. Just fucked everything up.
Well, yeah. This kind of authoritarian disease process is very hard to stop once it gets going. Yeah. And it is, lots of coups, including the beer hall putsch, start off with a kind of ragtag bunch of people that are completely ineffectual. Yeah.
And people are saying, watch out. It's all right to dismiss it now and go, oh, who cares? Yeah. But in 10 years' time, when Republicans next have unified government, it might be the beginning of an Orban period.
That is something to worry about. I'm not sure if you're going to have a stat sting for this.
I can if you want.
But I don't
Stats nugget.
I don't know if I was about to say I don't know if it's appropriate, but now it's too late. So the one thing which stuck in my mind from my reading this week was a Boogaloo boy. These are the kind of harder side of the insurrectionist militia movement. For those who don't know, the Boogaloo is the name which has been given for Civil War II, right? From Electric Boogaloo, the film. So one of the Boogaloo boys was speaking to a reporter, and the reporter said, "How has your interaction been since Capitol Hill? What's that done for your public image?" And he said, "We've received 14,000 emails."
Wow.
That's a lot of emails.
Did he just look at a lot of porn just before then?
I don't think that they were. I don't think it included this. Your question is, does it include the spam folder? Yes. Does it include the spam folder? I don't think it includes the spam folder.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes your point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
13,000 of those were from singles in his area.
Okay. I will use one argument though. Now I think about it against what you're saying though, and that is, I do take your point. It's a great point about the Klieg lights on craziness is only rewarded, but we do need to remember that these people who like to pull stunts are also incredibly lazy.
Yeah, but they have.
Let me cite examples for you. I've got two examples. Number one, Ron Johnson. Just the delightfully named Ron Johnson. Just this week, he got them to read out the entire COVID bill. Mm-hmm. They don't normally do that. It took 10 hours and 43 minutes. He said it was so everyone could know what was in there because we don't know otherwise. It's the time we found out. Of course, that's bullshit. It was just him pulling a stunt.
Yes.
He wasn't even there to hear it, obviously. They all cleared out because they said, 10 hours, 43 minutes. God. At the end of that 10 hours and 43 minutes, a Democrat popped up and said, I move a motion that we reduce tomorrow's debate from 20 hours to 3. Anyone oppose me? No Republicans are there. Thank you. So then they had 3 hours of debate rather than 20 hours. So it actually ended up being a shorter period rather than a longer, the standard period. And then, as if that wasn't enough, as if they wouldn't get the message from that, then they had this voterama thing where they just ask a million questions. They propose a million amendments, most of which are not serious at all. It's just
time wasting.
Time wasting.
Yeah.
Once again, the Republicans just went home at the end of it. So then Chuck Schumer gets up and says, I propose that we hold a vote for Merrick Garland's confirmation that Ted Cruz has been blocking until now. Anyone oppose it? Republicans have all gone home. So now they're having the Merrick Garland vote. And the fact that the day after they fell for that the first time, they fell for it the second time, suggests to me very lazy people.
Well, this is quite a complex area, and it's something which I'm sure you know more about. But to what extent are the Democrats still under the dead hand of convention, right? There's all these things that happen in Congress and the Senate, which are not strict rules. They're rules with easy workarounds, where the workarounds are just considered insulting. But surely we're past that point, right? I
think the answer to your question is there's probably about 10 Democrats who are not past that point.
Right.
And there's 40 who are very much past that point.
Yeah, because surely we'll get to the point where you don't just use that for a confirmation. You use that for absolute... That window is used for anything that you can use it for.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you could push it a lot further than
just, legalize the Republican Party in that period.
Sure. Anyway, that is interesting to see where that goes. But I would just flag that, from the evidence I've seen, once you got that 1 minute clip for Twitter, are they going to keep on going? Maybe it's just about fighting. It's not about actually getting anything done. It's just about fighting.
I think that's right. I don't think it's about... I think, as the Obamacare repeal showed, they had years and years and all these think tanks and, all this impetus to come up with an alternative. And it got to game day and they just kind of opened up this briefcase full of shredded newspaper. They had nothing. Well,
and that's why I'm suggesting the talking filibuster might expose that. But anyway, we'll see. I just wanted to say just 2 quick things about the filibuster before I throw to you about either the filibuster or the Senate, anything to do with the Senate, before we move on to a different topic. And that is there are the Democrats who are against the filibuster have 2 aces in the hole as far as the opponents go. When I say opponents, I mean Manchin and Sinema. Right?
Yes.
Who keep on talking about keeping the filibuster. Manchin is really, really into universal background checks.
Yes.
That's like his signature issue. He personally negotiated the bill. That ain't going to get up without getting rid of the filibuster or overcoming it in some way. Well, Kyrsten Sinema is the only bisexual member of Congress. They just passed the Equality Act in the House. That ain't getting up through that while there's a filibuster in the Senate. So both of them have a particular bill they are very interested in, and unless there is some workaround, they're not going to get it. So I just flag that. Yeah, go on.
That is as good an example as you can get of why bipartisanship, quote unquote bipartisanship, is never going to work. This is, I'm sure you can reel off a whole lot of stats here about how universal background checks, that's got to be close to one of the most popular in polling policies that you can get.
88% from memory.
It has almost as high support among gun owners as it does among non-gun owners. And here you have Joe Manchin, effectively a red state Democrat, going and performing. He's doing it exactly as people say he should. You know, this is the platonic ideal of how bipartisanship should work. And even the NRA, which is broke and a busted flush, still has enough legacy power to mean that it won't go anywhere. It is just impossible to get stuff done.
It is. That's a great note. Do you have anything else to say about the Senate before we move on?
Yeah. What is cinema? I mean, Manchin is just, I think, confused. You know, when I'm not sure if you saw this, but even the Republicans couldn't figure out what he was trying to do with stuff. He just seems like confused by the process, right? Why is cinema voting down a federal minimum wage? What are the theories that you've heard?
Well, there are no theories that I've heard for why she is. There is, she, according to her, she fought hard for the minimum wage increase in Arizona.
Yes.
And she's willing to fight hard for the minimum wage increase nationally, but just in the proper process.
Not right now.
According to her. Now, in Arizona, the Democrats said actually she had nothing to do. In fact, not only did she have nothing to do with the minimum wage rise in Arizona, but she remained silent throughout the entire debate, which I find very easy to believe because she remains silent for a lot of things, Kyrsten Sinema. She may well be functionally mute for all I know because she's pretty much never spoken inside the Senate. So I find that easy to believe.
She did tweet out in support of it during the federal election campaign,
yes,
didn't it? But that was just boilerplate, which was handed to her by the DNC or something. She wouldn't have read that. Right?
Yeah, look, the answer to your question, we have to do some mind reading from Kyrsten Sinema. There are no theories out there of just abuse, essentially. My best attempt to mind read is that the difference between Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema is that Joe Manchin, I'm not sure I agree that he's necessarily confused. I just think he's just in an impossible position. He's a Democrat in the most Republican state in America.
Yes.
and so he's in an impossible position trying to square that. And he needs to show... He needs to constantly give the red state that he represents a taste. He just has to. He has to give him something because otherwise he would lose his position. Kyrsten Sinema is not in that situation. Arizona is purple becoming blue. And she is significantly more mavericky than Mark Kelly, who is the other senator in Arizona.
Absolutely.
So my guess is that she is a person who identifies as, in inverted commas, independent.
I think this is right. This is my guess is it's just a kind of signalling, you know?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to have the signalling does not have to have any content.
No. I mean, this is really armchair psychology here. But if you see the way she dresses in the Senate, she likes to stand out.
No doubt.
Yeah. So I just think it's part of her personality. She likes to be one out. She likes to see herself in that way. By the way, I didn't just clothes shame her, fashion shame her. She can do that, but I'm just saying it just suggests to me that her personality is she likes to stand out and be one out and be independent.
Well, even the way that she stood up and gave a thumbs down in a very ostentatious way, which she knew was going to get covered, right? Yeah. And then her staff said that criticising that was sexist.
Yes, yeah. Anyway, but it's just guesswork. I got no idea what's going on with her. Because especially, given what I just said about her liking to be independent, why doesn't she ever speak? There's a lot of things that are hard to understand with Kyrsten Sinema.
I think that if you don't speak, you can, first of all, surprise people more easily.
Yeah.
You become this kind of legislative ninja that just comes out of the dark to make surprise votes and then slips back into the shadows.
With a sphinx-like enigmatic kind of vibe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Silent as the pyramids.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Let's talk, before we move off legislative type stuff, that we can't go past the American Rescue Plan because it's about to pass. This is very big. This is the COVID relief bill. Polling pretty well. It's I mean, it's hard to poll these things because they've got a million different parts, and Republicans, for whatever reason, have chosen not to go hard against it. They've chosen to talk about Mr. Potato Head instead.
Well, yeah, this is. I mean, I think free money, even if you're a small government type, at the moment, free government money is a hard thing to stand against.
But you could say we're pro-free government money and we're against the other $1.5 trillion in that bill.
That's what they've tried to do. But I think that sort of passing just gets reported as we're against free money. And probably. Also Trump has made it hard for them because Trump is very pro-free money.
He is.
So if you come out as anti-free money, you have to be anti-Trump, and they can't do that at the moment.
Well, just the numbers at the moment. Morning Consult, 77% approve of the bill. Supposedly, I don't know exact question they asked, including 59% of Republicans. When described as a democratic plan in the question, 71% approve, including 53% of Republicans.
Wow, that is...
Yeah,
that's going to stick.
Yes. There's been a lot of manoeuvring at the last second. I'll just talk you through some of that briefly. There's been some weird penny pinching on the stimulus and the unemployment benefits. As far as the stimulus goes, they've kept the full checks, the $1,400, going to people who earn $75,000 or less, or $150,000 for couples. But they've reduced the phase out. It used to phase out from $75,000 to $100,000. Now it's phasing out from $75,000 to $80,000, which saves a massive $12 billion out of $1.9 trillion. It leaves out 12 million people. The net result of that is that it would benefit 86% of adults and 85% of children instead of 91% of adults and 90% of children.
Yeah, this is the weird stuff where you're trying to make sense of it. And some of these things where you think, why is this happening? It's donor proclivities, right?
Yeah.
The rich people, they're very eccentric. They have eccentric considerations, and they get upset and they call these legislators.
And then they call Joe Manchin.
Yeah,
that's right.
Another thing that
come on the red line
is on the signalling.
Yeah.
You have to show that you have some influence over a big bill. And most of the time, the way that you can do that as a not very important legislator is by changing something which doesn't really make any difference.
That's fair. That's fair. I should say, by the way, to be fair to this strange change, the employment rates of those people in that bracket have actually gone up over the last year. They're higher than they were at the beginning of 2020. Like, these people are not suffering from COVID. Right? At least not directly through their employment, at the very least. So there is an argument to be made that you are targeting the checks more finely when you do this. But having said that, the other $1.5 trillion of the bill is not being targeted nearly as closely as that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is, Keynesian stimulus. You're just trying to shovel it out as quickly as you can. Yeah. But as we saw in the Obama years, the key in stimulus is that it should never be as effective as it should be. Because then it would be too politically popular.
Sure. Unemployment, they've been messing around with as well. They went from a federal boost of $400 a month. When so that's on top of whatever they would get in that state. Like if in California, they might get $500, so that'd be $900. In Mississippi, they might get, 75 cents. So that's $400.75. But they've rolled that back from $400 a month boost to $300 a month. But they are extending the benefits from August to September. So an extra month. And apparently this is a big deal. They're going to make the first $10,200 of unemployment benefits tax exempt. The reason that's a big deal is because $10,200 happens to be how much you would earn in unemployment benefits if you had received it from the moment COVID started to the end of this bill.
Right.
So that way, none of the COVID unemployment benefits will be taxed. Otherwise, you're getting well into the tax zone with some of this unemployment.
Well, that's good.
So that's good.
That's really good.
That's good. But it'd be nice if they didn't cut the boost by $100. Whatever. Anyway, but whatever. You can like it. You can dislike it. That's what it is. Okay. I will say this though. There is, just on your signalling thing, I did see an interesting poll which illustrates the politics of why they do mess with these handouts in such a pissy way. This is from Data for Progress, who come up with some very interesting polls sometimes. I'm going to read you a quote. This is what they polled on. Some lawmakers in Congress are proposing creating a child allowance. So it's about child allowance, not about this, but still. Open to all middle-class and low-income families. If this program is created, how concerned or not concerned would you be that some single mothers would choose to slightly reduce the number of hours they work for a wage each week? So bear in mind, this is for a child tax credit that's like $300 a month. Okay, so
Yes.
no one's going to live on the child tax credit.
Where the correct answer is, who gives a shit?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And the answer is 57% said they were somewhat or very concerned, including 49% of Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of Reagan-era welfare queen. This is just so deeply baked in.
Yeah.
But I also think, I mean, those polls are a bit fuzzy.
And they support the child allowance, by the way.
Yeah.
68% supported the child allowance.
That's a situation where you could just be concerned on behalf of the child or something. You know what I mean?
Sure.
The questioning is a bit fuzzy over what concern means. But certainly, you know, I know locally, speaking to people who've conducted focus groups, you would be surprised how many people get mad at the prospect of someone here getting JobKeeper when they'd previously been a barista or whatever, and then they're at home playing PlayStation, earning more money than they were before. Some people seem to feel that very viscerally. So this, I'm sure, is a factor here as well.
Yeah, I think they do. I suppose we should mention the minimum wage as well, which is obviously not part of this bill. It's still popular. 60% support it, 32% don't. The problem, though, one of the problems...
Cinema is in that 32% though.
I think she definitely is. The problem for Democrats, apart from Kirsten Sinema, is that, because it wasn't just her, 8 Democrat senators, because of course Bernie Sanders was not giving up. He just kept on bringing up amendments going, how about something called the Shinneman Phage, which allows... No, he didn't do that. But the 8 Democrat senators were against essentially the minimum wage in the amendment process. Carper, Coons, Ghassan, Angus King, Joe Manchin, Jean Shaheen, Kirsten Sinema, John Tester. So it's not just Sinema. It's the problem is this, essentially. The majority of Democrats live in a place where $15 an hour is a completely reasonable wage.
Yes.
Like a completely reasonable minimum wage I'm talking about. Because in cities, that's the cost of living. But to win the Senate, you need to hold states where the minimum wage is $8 and the median wage is $15. So like Mississippi, places like that. And so if you brought in the $15 wage into Mississippi, I'm not saying that it would destroy Mississippi, as if you could destroy Mississippi. But it would take some serious adjustment. Like that would double the minimum wage. That would be basically the minimum wage would be higher than the median wage, which I think is $14.22 off the top of my head in Mississippi. So the entire cost of living, the entire price structure of Mississippi would have to change. Would have to double essentially.
Yes.
And so the people you need. So as far as polling goes for Democrats, most of the Democrats in places where $15 as a minimum wage seems extremely reasonable and in fact stupid to not have. But the majority of states exist in a place where that's a massive change. Even if it's a reasonable change, it's still a massive change.
And it's a rapid change
Yeah.
because the federal minimum wage has lagged productivity and inflation for such a long time.
Yeah.
It's it's what happens in all kinds of public infrastructure in a way. That if you leave it too late, it's just incredibly difficult to do.
Yeah. Which is also, by the way, the reason why I'm such a fan of bills to increase the minimum wage to a lower level, but link it to inflation, because then you can take another stab down the track. If you go, okay, let's raise it up to $11 over or $12 over 5 years, and then link it to inflation, and then in 10 years' time, we'll just bump it up another $3. Like at that point in time, it won't be such a big leap.
Something which surprises me as well here is that the Democrats haven't made more political hay out of the GOP attempting to rebrand as the working man's party. that, you have Cruz and Hawley and these other sort of populists saying, we are now the party of the working class. I don't understand why they don't stick it to them over an issue on the minimum wage where, surprise, surprise, Hawley votes no as well.
Although Hawley does have his alternatives.
He does.
He does.
He does.
He had. We talked about one of his alternatives the other week. This week he's got another one. He's got a second one, which is that he favours a $15 minimum wage for any companies that earn more than $1 billion.
Interesting.
Which is I can understand the logic behind it. I don't think economically it's very, very sensible, because then you'll immediately have a whole bunch of companies who earn $999,999,999 for sure. It's like it incentivizes just complicated tax work rather than anything else. But at least he's trying to come up with some fig leaf.
Yeah,
which is better than no.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that that fig leaf is half sincere as well, I think. So, partial credit.
Yeah, sure. I should say, by the way, I also think the thing that would actually, this is a more long-term project, but the thing that if you actually care about wages in America, and I'm not saying that accusatorily, I'm not going, Bernie Sanders, if you really care, because he does really care, and he's on board with what I'm about to say, which is the thing that would actually make the biggest difference. It's not just increasing the minimum wage, it's increasing unionism. Like you look at places like, say, Denmark have no minimum wage at all, but they have an effective minimum wage in industries of over $20 an hour because they have strong unions.
A friend of mine has this policy, and I think that we should take on a version of it.
Yes.
It's his personal policy, but it's also about policy.
Yeah.
And he says that in policy discussions, you're not allowed to talk about Northern Europe, and you're not allowed to talk about the Netherlands, and you're not allowed to talk about Switzerland.
Yeah.
And they are just this separate thing that aren't scalable or translatable. And you can't say, what if the United States was like Denmark? Because it's not going to be. And the unionization trend, even before stuff like right to work laws, it's the causation is to some extent in reverse. Unions are weak enough that you can introduce anti-union legislation.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, the only thing I would say, the only pushback I give you on that, Rich, of saying that you are not allowed to use Northern Europe as an example ever for anything, is that I think you remember, because we went to the same uni, that back at uni, my ex-girlfriend used to say the same thing about me. You can never use Chaz as an example for anything ever in the debate or an argument.
She was right.
I didn't like it, and so I understand how Denmark feels.
The principle holds. That what should happen is that Minnesota or California or Maryland or Delaware should become the kind of the Denmark of the USA. And this is why people get very upset about California, because that is supposed to be the progressive template that other states point to and say, see, look how well it's working over there.
And they're not.
And it's done, and it's not.
Yeah. It's definitely not. I want to just highlight a couple of other things in this bill. One is, and this is slightly more complicated than your normal press would get into, which is the blue state bailout concept.
Oh,
yes. Ron DeSantis is quite keen on this, because basically they're giving $350 billion to states and local governments, right? And Ron DeSantis says, quote, they are actually rewarding the states that have the highest unemployment rates. So if you lock down, if you destroyed your own economy through your own policies, you're getting a windfall. And the states like Florida, they've worked to put people back to work, that have saved our economies, we end up getting the short end of the stick. That's what he says. Now, before I get into the detail here, and I'm going to, I warn you, but, in theory, it is the most important part of the bill, the $350 billion for the states.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that, and local governments, the reason for that is because they drive a huge amount of employment in the country. And because of their budgets, the fact that they basically almost all of them, I think 49 out of the 50, apart from Vermont, off the top of my head, have to have balanced budgets. Every time they get squeezed because of a pandemic or because of a recession, they need to balance the budget, and they're paying more unemployment, and they're raising less revenue, and so they just have to cut a lot of workers. In fact, even as we speak, last week we got 370,000, I think, or 360,000 jobs created last month. There were still jobs being shed by state governments even now. So at this point in the pandemic recovery cycle, so they desperately need money to get to. I think they're down. Hang on, I've actually got it here. I can tell you the exact number that they are down in terms of employment. Here we are. Sorry. Let's see how quickly I can find things. Oh, no. They are, sorry, I wish I could talk at the same time as I can search. You talk.
I can talk. Yeah. So what never comes back, it's something that people on social media say, but it's seldom found in the press, let alone among politicians, is that a lot of red states are net takers from the federal budget.
They sure are.
So, Montana wouldn't exist. It certainly wouldn't have roads without taking more in federal funds than it puts in. But no one calls that a red state bailout in all the non-pandemic years where it's happening. So this is, to some extent, this is just, the majority of the economic activity in the United States happens in Democratic-held cities and counties. So this is, to some extent, a repayment of federal funds. But it is, of course, a great opportunity for the Ron DeSantis's of the world to say, well, their model doesn't work and ours does.
They've got 83,000 job hole at the moment, state governments.
Yeah, I mean, that is
yeah.
These are supposed to be the people driving the economic stimulus, largely through employing people more and paying them more.
Okay, now, that's the theory. There is, though, an interesting element in the detail.
I'm intrigued.
How is that $350 billion being apportioned? This is how. State governments get, and Washington, D.C. get $195 billion of that. The rest goes to the local governments, okay? That $195 billion, each state is getting $500 million, and then $169 billion is divided up according to each state's share of national unemployed workers.
Seems fair.
That's how it does seem fair.
Except...
The Urban Institute has crunched the numbers on revenue drop-off between April and December in 2020 versus 2019. Let me tell you the states with the worst revenue collapses. This is not in order. This is just the group of states in the worst. There's the blue states, Hawaii, Oregon, and Delaware. There's red states, Alaska, North Dakota, Texas, Wyoming, Louisiana, Montana. There's purple states, Nevada and Florida. Florida is one of the ones that needs this money the most. But if you look at the unemployment rates, the red states almost uniformly have lower unemployment rates than blue states, as in the well-run red states.
Yes.
There's the red states not doing so well. But if you arrange in terms of unemployment rates, the red states are all down the bottom. Well, all down the bottom are red states, and then you have the well-run blue states, which is the point Ron DeSantis is making. He's saying
we didn't close restaurants.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is the theory is right. They absolutely need this money. Their formula is wrong. It shouldn't be based on unemployment rates. It should be based on revenue lost. But that's what it should be based on.
Ron DeSantis can't say that.
Yes.
And also there is a likelihood that he would refuse part or all of that money as a kind of diehard stance.
It's interesting you mentioned that. There's a 5% Medicaid expansion bump. They're already paying 90% of Medicaid, the federal government, for the expansion. When I say expansion, what I mean is up to 138% of the poverty line is supposed to be funded by Medicaid in the states, and a bunch of red states said, no, we're just not going to do that.
Yes.
And so you end up with this weird situation where the people, say, between 50% of the poverty line, 138% of the poverty line have no support whatsoever. They have no health insurance and no support in buying health insurance. But people above that get subsidised. So you don't earn enough to get helped, but you earn too little to get helped at the same time, which is bizarre. They offered a 5% Medicaid bump as part of this package. Every single non-expansion state has refused to take it, just like you said. So there you go. Interestingly, you put that together with the Obamacare subsidies, because they've also pumped up Obamacare subsidies in this bill. Until now, Obamacare subsidies only extended up to 4 times the poverty rate, which is about 50 grand, essentially. Now they're changing it for 1 year or 2 years. I think it might be 2 years. It might be 1 year, but only for a short period of time. They're changing it to be unlimited. And what the subsidy is going to be is whatever the difference is between what you're paying for health insurance and 8.5% of your income. So the theory is as you earn more, 8.5% of your income is more, and so you need less subsidy. Right? So that's the theory.
That's the logic.
That's the logic. The problem is that health insurance is really expensive, and you need to get. So if we take, say, a benchmark Obamacare premium in Prescott, Arizona, for a family of 5 with a 60-year-old household head, take a guess. How much
monthly payment?
Yearly payment.
Okay. How many in the household?
5.
60-year-old head.
60-year-old head.
I'm going to guess it's about $38,000 US.
$51,000.
That's a lot.
You need to get to $580,000 annual income before you no longer qualify for subsidies. But if you're in the Medicaid gap with 90% of the poverty line as your income level and you're in Texas, you're not going to get a cent. So it's bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, this is the attempt to prevent people in red states getting on the government teat, on the federal government teat, and learning that people not dying because of the Medicaid expansion means that government might work sometimes. We can't have that.
Do you have anything else to say about... I'm going to talk more about this bill with Dave for sure, but do you have anything else to say about this bill? Because we should move on.
I think we've fully explored it.
I've done the detail.
I've added everything that I can.
Okay. All right. I'm going to give you a choice of where we move now to... I mean, we're going to do both. Do we move to COVID/Texas, or do we move to cancel culture?
I like this choose your own adventure style.
Ooh,
I think we should move to cancel culture.
Okay, let's do that. All right.
I think we should move to cancel culture.
Okay. So, I'll set up. You take it from there.
Okay.
Everyone's favourite books were cancelled. Did you hear? Everyone's favourite books being And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street, If I Ran the Zoo, McElligott's Pool, On Beyond Zebra, Scrambled Egg Super, and The Cat's Quizzer. They've been banned. Well, when I say banned, they're not banned. What I mean is the publisher has chosen not to publish it anymore, like happens with 99.999% of books.
Yes.
If I wrote a book, the publisher would elect to take it from publishing before I even finished.
You've been cancelled before you had a chance.
That's right. But anyway, but those books are no longer being offered because they have pictures in them that have been deemed insensitive. You wouldn't know what those pictures look like if you watch Fox News because they haven't aired them once. They just keep on talking about them. I wonder why they don't show the pictures. But let's leave that aside for a second. John showed the pictures on our show. By the way, before we talk about the cancel culture thing, let's just talk briefly about our view of the actual... let's leave out the outrage. Let's just talk about the issue rationally. And then we'll talk about irrationally.
Is that possible?
No, I think you can.
Okay.
If you are them and you have the Ching Chong Chinaman picture in your book, right? Would you do the same thing or would you do something different?
Well, I think everybody has a line where, I mean, a friend of mine growing up had a hand-me-down. He was British, which is where the problem starts.
Yes.
Rupert the teddy bear, the one that wore the plaid pants.
Yes.
He had a book which was called Rupert on N-Word Island.
I see.
Now, I'm presuming that some time ago, Rupert on N-Word Island became unavailable for purchase in a shop.
Probably.
But if I went to the British Library,
Yeah.
I could take out a copy.
Yeah.
So there's a line that the problem is I don't think it is possible to talk about these things rationally, right? Because we're really talking about social taboos. And social taboos are motivated by power.
Yep.
So, in traditional Hawaiian culture, all sorts of things, not just in traditional Hawaiian culture, that's the example I'm going to use, a non-noble person touching a banana was a fatal offence.
Rich, you can't say that on a podcast.
What?
A non-native
A
P touching a B word. You can't say that. You get pulled off air.
I'm sorry. Let's drive through and say everything that we're going to say because it's we are going to be cancelled now.
Yeah.
There are millions of people who have died over what letters Jesus' name is spelt with.
Sure.
These kinds of things.
Yeah.
There is no non-trivial, non-emotional way to talk about it. There's only this fight over things which are apparently trivial and apparently non-emotional. And the reason I think that the fight has changed is because one of the reasons is that it is so difficult to produce large-scale reform or change by other means.
Yeah. Well, all I'd say before we move on is that I'm going to move on from the topic, but move on to other parts, is that what I'm referring to is not that we sit around and look at the Chinaman pic and go, oh, is that offensive? Is that not offensive? Whatever. I'm not suggesting that. What I'm saying is there are other solutions other than pulling the book. Like, this is not new. Like you say, This is not new. This has been happening forever.
Yes.
And, 150 years ago, fairy tales were very different to what they were, say, 70 years ago or 80 years ago. And they got sanitized. Like
Absolutely.
You look at your Grimm's fairy tales, they're very, very different in the original Grimm than they became, right?
And there's also situations where, Shakespeare, for example, if we go back to the 19th century, does get sanitized. This is where bowdlerization comes from.
Yeah.
The Boulder edition of Shakespeare takes out all the murder and incest and sexy bits and cleans it all up.
Yeah. So if I'm the Seuss family and I've got this book which is basically fine, but just with one dodgy picture, I'm just changing the picture. That's what I'm doing.
That may violate some stipulation of the Seuss estate. This all stuff gets very complicated. That may not be possible.
Well, it's the Seuss estate that's making the decision. I'm saying if I'm the Seuss estate, that's what I'd do.
I mean that they may have been given instructions by Seuss that you can't do stuff like that, for example.
Maybe. Look, I don't know. But that was my first impulse. When I heard this, I thought, why don't they just do what people have done for generations, which is when something gets out of date, just make a tiny change to modernize it. There are artists. They can make it look like Dr. Seuss did it. No one would know the difference. No one would care. No one would even notice unless you pointed it out.
But if you did that and someone did notice, you would be accused of doing Soviet-style airbrushing.
Probably.
So there's no easy win.
I'll throw out one other one as well, which is this is a bit libertarian, but it's if you have a situation where someone elects to not print a book anymore, because and it's like a dead person's book, so it's one of those things where the copyrights lasted forever for whatever reason, is it like the person's been dead for whatever, you just exhaust copyright. If someone else wants to print it, they can.
Well, they will, but you'll end up then with a crackpot libertarian publishing house publishing all of this stuff, which may happen anyway. Yeah.
Anyway, that's my attempt to discuss this rationally. Well, but then we get into
It's funny you mentioned the libertarian aspect, right? Because if you go back to things like the Civil Rights Act and you look at segregation, say, running a segregated hotel, the argument at the time made by conservatives was we don't like this, but, I mean, some conservatives loved it. But the ones who didn't like it said it should be up to the customers of the hotel to complain. They can post bad reviews, not post. They can make bad reviews. The name of this place will become mud, and then it won't be able to do that anymore. And it's pretty clear that they never expected that to actually work. Yeah. And what has happened in the online era is that exactly that has happened. Yes. Yeah. And those same people have turned around and compared it to Nazism.
That's fair. Yeah, I know, not as Nazism, but yeah, that is a fair point. Yes. Yes.
If we look back at the historical standard of cancellation, I was telling you about this before. It's just all over the place, the kind of things that people used to get in trouble for or not get in trouble for. And if we go back, a lot of this is anxiety around universities and campuses and what students are allowed to do. And I'm going to give you an example about how the past is a different country, about two people who went on to become famous. One of them is William Empson, the literary critic, right? When he was at university, I think it was at Cambridge, a butler found a condom in his rooms, right?
Okay.
And he was immediately expelled.
It was cancelled.
It was described as a prophylactic engine, and he was booted out of university and completely disgraced, right? Now, around the same time...
They wanted him to go raw. That's strange.
William Empson was expected to raw dog. Or not at all. Around the same time, Robert Oppenheimer, who goes on to become, the father of one of the fathers of atomic weaponry, repeatedly attempted to murder people when he was at university and was gently reprimanded and told not to do it again. He tried to kill his tutor by poisoning an apple, and he also tried to strangle one of his student friends while they were sleeping. He was, had severe psychiatric problems.
Yeah.
And apparently he was so physically puny that the person he tried to strangle just laughed.
Okay.
But the poison was real and would have potentially been fatal had this guy eaten it.
And he got reprimanded.
And he just had a little chat. So condom, you get booted.
Yeah.
But attempted murder is fine.
So there were inconsistencies. Yes.
It's just, it's a topsy-turvy world.
And
we're at the other end of it now.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Seuss example, and then we'll let's generalize it. Because I should point out there's a few very specific things about this. So they had this situation where you had the 6 books were taken from publication by the publishers, and Fox were the ones who took it the hardest. There were 139 mentions of Dr. Seuss on Fox on one day, Tuesday. 139 mentions of Dr. Seuss. There were other things that happened on that day, by the way. It's not like this is the only thing that happened. Glenn Beck, I think he probably wins as far as the race to make the biggest goose of himself.
They are banning Dr. Seuss books. How much more do you need to see before all of America wakes up and goes, this is fascism? This is fascism. You don't destroy books. What is wrong with us, America? Go out and buy those books today. Find out if you can get them. Buy Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head, because it's the end of an era. It is the end of freedom in America.
Okay, so this is now Fahrenheit 451. the destruction of books. And you mentioned the Potato Head as well, which is, I should just say, we mentioned it before. In case you don't know, that is even dumber than this, in that the case of Potato Head, it was once called Mr. Potato Head until a month ago, and Mrs. Potato Head. Mr. Potato and Mrs. Potato Head are still there. They've just universalized the brand name to be Potato Head. That's it. The brand name has become Potato Head. You can still buy Mr. Potato Head under the Potato Head brand and Mrs. Potato Head under the Potato Head brand. But apparently these people are so driven crazy by pronouns that the removal of the pronoun is also like Fahrenheit 451, apparently, the end of freedom.
Look, I think that what has happened here is that we've seen the end of kind of the Napoleonic era of culture war.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
like
I
the
don't.
grand, sweeping, dynamic, chivalrous era of culture war where really big stuff happens over
sure.
like Madonna and
Gotcha.
parental advisory lyrics. That's over.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the Waterloo was gay marriage. Gay marriage passing is just huge. And after that, it's this kind of the sort of sexual morality stuff is basically over. You know, you can have a song like WAP be number one in the US. That would have just resulted in conservative pandemonium not that long ago, and they just kind of take it, right? So instead, we have kind of cultural World War I. It's trench warfare.
Yeah.
It's all fought over inches of dirt back and forth over things which are apparently futile and meaningless because you can't do the grand stuff anymore. The grand stuff is over.
But they're treating it like it's the grand stuff. Like Spencer Clavin from Daily Wire, and I'm citing this because I'm going to come back to Daily Wire, said, quote, "This is not a minor thing. It is everything."
Well, yeah. I mean, this is again, there is no trivia in culture war.
No.
But also something that has happened is that when we're talking about, I think this is actually in the US related to stuff like the Senate, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Tell me
Where
this.
you have a democratic deficit for people who live in cities, especially young minorities, right? Their votes are essentially worthless. They earn significantly less than previous generational cohorts. They have no way to make their voices heard politically in a way that does anything. What do they have instead? Cultural power and economic power at consumption level. And that is what they are hammering. And the right recognises quite reasonably when you have McDonald's tweeting out Black Trans Lives Matter, something very dramatic has changed. So that the legislative fight has to some extent shifted to the cultural side.
That makes sense. Yeah. No, I think that and also this is something that is simple enough for them to fight about as well. Because try and fight about inequality. Like, what the hell's going on there? What's the cause? What's the, like economics and politics is extremely complicated and very hard to understand. This is very easy to understand, very easy to fight.
And it's also the ability of media, the ability of anybody to end political careers, to, make legislative shifts.
True. Instant retribution as well.
Nobody's going to write a book, a novel that changes the world anymore. You know what I mean? Their best bet is to send a tweet that might get someone fired.
On that note, this is just off the top of my head. I wonder if the fact that the medium through which we communicate is changing the things we communicate about.
Oh, of course it is.
Like, I wonder if this is the kind of thing you can tweet about.
Yeah.
You can't tweet about broad social movements.
100%.
You can tweet about this.
It has to be mimetically reproducible, right? Like Cuomo killing all these people essentially in New York. I mean,
we'll get to him as well.
Yeah. It really says something about the political and cultural moment that it required some not third degree allegations of harassment and sexual harassment.
And in particular, a photo.
Yes.
Yeah.
For a policy which killed thousands of people to attract a political penalty.
Yeah.
It had to happen in reverse. He had to be cancelled before he could be held accountable.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great observation. I should say, by the way, this is not a stats nugget, but
Thank goodness for that.
just out of curiosity, can you guess how many copies of the Cat's Quizzer was sold this year before it was banned?
My guess is that almost all of them would have been institutional purchases. They would have been bought by libraries and things like that, or by Seuss completionists.
I'm sure there's lots of them.
It
Glenn
would be
Beck's one of them.
It would be in the triple figures, maybe 250.
Okay, that is a great guess because I saw the sales of all 6 of the books, and the highest one's in Mulberry Street. That's 636.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are in the 200 range.
Right.
But the Cat's Quizzer has sold 2. 2. It was kind of cancelled before it was cancelled, I feel. I feel it's cancelled by the market.
Well, whoever those 2 people are have got a real collector's item on their hands.
They certainly do.
They should get it up on eBay now and sell it to the Fox News audience.
Well, that's the thing, actually. There's the one thing I will give. There's the one thing I will give to people, and I haven't even started on being some people up the arse, but the one thing I'll give those people is that eBay is weird. Did you see eBay's removing the books?
I did see that.
But now that's bullshit.
Yeah.
That's absolute bullshit. Like, it's one thing to say, okay, yeah, the publisher isn't selling anymore, but to say that eBay is saying you can't even sell it secondhand because it's so immoral, that is bullshit.
Another aspect here in terms of this reduced power that we're talking about, right? I mean, employees of these massive tech companies have a poor chance of unionizing themselves. They have a poor chance at getting job security in the traditional way. What they can do is kind of steer the ship to do stuff like that and give them a sensation of control.
Anyway, but I just want to say that I've got a theory on all this because this actually links to something else as well, which is that, like, because John talked about this on the show, he showed the pictures and he said, well, yeah, they look pretty dodge.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But I think you missed the point, which is that the entire outrage, in my view, is clearly in bad faith. And I'll tell you why I say that. It's because none of the people being outraged have referred to the actual books. No one's holding up the book. No one's reading the book. No one's pointing to the book. No one's showing the pictures. If they actually thought it was outrageous, what was done, we've been seeing those pictures constantly. The fact we don't see those pictures tells me it ain't about the pictures. Right? So the outrage is in bad faith. Kevin McCarthy just tweeted out him reading Green Eggs and Ham.
I saw that.
This is not about Green Eggs and Ham. Stop trying to conflate Green Eggs and Ham and The Cat in the Hat and Dr. Seuss in general with The Cat's Quizzer, which sold 2 copies. Like the attempt to conflate them suggests to me, once again, bad faith again. And I don't know if you know where this came from, this whole story. But actually, I happened to see firsthand. Because one of the blogs which I read a lot of blogs, as you know,
yes,
is the Daily Wire.
Uh-huh.
And I happened to just notice, like a week ago, they ran a story about this old study, like 2 or 3 years old, about Dr. Seuss, saying that didn't have enough people of colour, because it didn't have enough people. But anyway, it didn't have enough people of colour, and it even cited that some of them were offensively drawn, but that wasn't the main point. The main point was not enough people of colour.
Uh-huh.
That was what the study said, right? And they held that up and they said, look at this. Oh, they're trying to ban Dr. Seuss. They're trying to cancel Dr. Seuss. And at the time I thought, wow, this is really weak tea. And I was going to do a piece about it on the show. So I was looking at Twitter saying, is anyone buying this? And there were just none. There were just no left-wingers playing this game at all. It was just people being outraged on the right, someone trying to ban Dr. Seuss. No one was trying to ban Dr. Seuss. Just people outraged at the idea of someone trying to ban Dr. Seuss. And then this press release came out after that. Daily Wire went crazy because I was like, yeah, here we go. And they ran like 4 articles about it. Fox News has got a direct line from the Daily Wire. They love them, especially Tucker Carlson. So Fox News picked it up off that, and then it went crazy.
They manifested it.
Yes, they manifested it.
It's like The Secret.
Yes, they did.
They used the attractional force of the energy to generate a cultural war from thin air.
And it reminded me of this story with Gina Carano from like 2 weeks ago, which was this person on The Mandalorian,
Yep.
an actor who did this stupid Instagram post, which was Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbours, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realise that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbours hate them, simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? Okay, I can think of a lot of ways that that's different. But let's leave aside whether that's an intelligent thing to write or not. I was like in a meme, right? She then got sacked, essentially because she's conservative. And
Yes.
she's pointing out conservative memes that are dumb, right? Apparently she'd tweeted out a few conservative things before as well, so they had her in the gun anyway. I wouldn't be sacking people for that.
No.
Like, of course, I find that kind of thing ridiculous. But the fact is that she became a bit of a cause célèbre amongst conservatives, going, they're cancelling conservatives. The Daily Wire, oh my God, they hired her to make a movie.
Yeah, with Ben Shapiro, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ben
Yeah.
Shapiro is not an actor. I'm looking forward to that movie because they have never made any kind of film before other than having Ben Shapiro sitting at a desk being smarter than everyone else. That is the entire Daily Wire oeuvre, right? But apparently they're making a movie with Gina Carano. They ran so many articles about this. They ran articles about her trending on IMDb.
Yeah.
About her how her the Google mentions were more than The Mandalorian during the controversy. There's just so many really specious kind of articles, which is about nothing. They were just trying to basically promote this person who's going to make this movie for them. And then interviews, and just went on and on. I suddenly realised halfway through this, just going, after the 20th article, I go, Daily Wire is monetizing this.
Of course.
This has got nothing to do with outrage about Gina Carano. This is an opportunity to market themselves. And then they did the same thing with Dr. Seuss. This is just completely marketing. Like, there's just no good faith about these outrages at all. So go on.
I think that it's complementary, that the idea is, it's almost, it is a bizarre world where you sort of have every day you wake up and something different, it's like you're looking, especially if you're in a different time zone, you're kind of looking one eye blurry at the phone, looking at the social media, and there's a conservative account you follow, and there's a guy who's destroying his own coffee machine with a hammer.
Yeah.
And you're like, why did this happen today? And then someone else is saying, we're boycotting beans. We're boycotting Goya beans. We're not buying any Goya beans.
Yes.
So it is this kind of shibboleth, like taboo culture where if we renounce something, we take it up, and vice versa. Have you ever been to Bologna in Italy?
No.
So in the square in Bologna, there are these towers. There's quite a few of them, and they have arrow slits in them. And there's still a controversy about what they were used for. But one of the theories is that in the very factional politics of like Renaissance Italy, people from different factions would go into different towers and they'd just kind of like shoot arrows at each other and pour boiling oil on each other. And then they'd go home. And it was just like, it's just a job. It was like commuting. You just go and take pot shots at the people in the other towers. And this is how you work out the kind of, daily factional friction.
So that's dispute resolution, or is that just sport?
It's not
just
resolution.
It's just
yeah.
venting.
It's just that the factionalism happens in such a way that it's just the focus of the public square.
And it's people in particular factions go to particular...
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't go to, you've got your tower, they've got theirs.
Sure. Wow.
Yeah. So, that's kind of apocryphal. That's one version. But this is kind of where we're at,
Is
right?
that your diagnosis of what needs to happen?
It'd be fun. I wouldn't mind to go in one of the towers.
Sure. Wow. I did not know that. Do you have other thoughts about this? Oh, actually, no. There are other topics. So, do you have any other thoughts about cancel culture or so forth?
I've got a lot, but I'm still figuring it out. I actually think it's I've been writing about this for a while, and partly because cancel culture is such a bad term, especially a bad umbrella term, to make sense of so many different things, that it becomes confused. But this is one thing I will say is this is not just a US phenomenon, and something which has surprised even me, who spent a bit of time looking at it, is the primacy that it's taken on in conservative politics. Like when Trump did speak at CPAC, right? He had a sign behind him that said "Uncancelled America."
Yeah.
And in the French presidential election campaign, which is happening between Macron and Le Pen, cancel culture and identity politics and what they call Islamo-leftism, which they claim it's exactly the opposite. They claim that all the problems are imported by American academics into France, and the Americans claim that it's all French academics importing it into the US, right? It's really important there as well. So for whatever reason, partly I think because it's been so successful, this left identity politics has really become super important to conservatives all over the world. And from your knowledge, is it always at the moment the left who are pushing it? Who are pushing?
Who are doing the inverted commas the cancelling?
No, of course not. It's.
Oh, I know. There's right. But I mean, primarily at the moment, it's conservatives who are getting upset at people on the left.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a real change, and I'll be quick in trying to diagnose this, but there are real institutional changes which point to a real phenomenon, which is not just, something you can talk about in bad faith. Like if you look at the ACLU, right? This is an organization that not long ago was completely committed to enforcing the constitutional protections for neo-Nazis, right? You had Jewish lawyers working for the ACLU arguing in court on behalf of like the white knights of the Ku Klux Klan, okay? That just doesn't happen anymore.
No.
The ACLU has changed that policy because they can't find anyone to do it. Yeah. That's new.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is absolutely true. By the way, I know I say this every time, but just for people who haven't heard me say this before, you can hear me say it now, that it's the simplest thing in the world to deal with. As you say, this is a complicated topic, but to deal with at least one aspect of this topic, which is people just need to stop taking the bait. Like, it's just so easy. It's just so easy. If a company, like in the case of Mandalorian, okay, if Gina Carano was actually, if there actually was this massive groundswell of outrage at Gina Carano's stupid Instagram post, and Disney and the Mandalorian just said, yeah, she's just an actor on our show. We don't care. No comment. It would go. A day or two later, it would be gone. Like it's just not true that they are forced to do things. These companies just jump at shadows, and that creates power. That creates power for the next cancer, the next outrage. And I just wish some companies would just go, no, I'm not playing ball.
Some have done that. Like Trader Joe's, for example, just said we're not going to allow these to be cancelled,
and it's fine.
Yeah, but look, it's when you reach a point of partisanship where politics is happening in a symbolic register and it's pretty much zero sum, everything becomes partisan. Like if you go to Northern Ireland, literally everything is partisan. It's sectarian, right? Every street, every name, every school, every restaurant, every sport, everybody knows who is Catholic and Protestant within 5 minutes of meeting them.
Yeah.
And this is down from a peak. That's where it ends up.
Well, that suggests that people should not play ball to not end up in that area. Anyway, okay, all right. I'll give you, let's play everyone's favorite game of you choose the topic. We've got 2 topics left, and we might not have time for both. So
I thought we had 2 topics left, and I had already chosen one.
But I forgot there was another one.
This is the worst game show I've ever appeared on.
The 2 topics are COVID/Texas and Cuomo.
Let's do Cuomo.
Cuomo it is.
Let's do Cuomo because this is, I think, a really interesting example of how it's so difficult to create accountability in modern politics, especially in a one-party state.
Yeah.
How do you get rid of someone like Cuomo if he's done the wrong thing?
Well,
You have to cancel him.
There we go. The circle is complete. Let's just remind people of the story. Okay, so first of all, like Richie alluded to before, Cuomo has had dramas going for a little while, which was, first of all, he had this policy. He wasn't the only one. There were other people in other states in America that had this policy of clearing out hospitals by when there's someone from a nursing home in a hospital, trying to get them to go back to, basically the nursing home has to take them unless, well, the law said unless they really could not take them. In reality, the nursing homes felt a lot of pressure to take them.
They were really compelled to take them.
Yeah. And this became a story in June. In June last year, ProPublica noticed this, and they noticed that New York had a lot of deaths from nursing homes. They said, "Oh, how about that?" And then all of a sudden, people noticed that there were a bunch of other blue states that had the same problem. And then all of them changed their rules very rapidly. Because, of course, yes, it's one thing to say, in the perfect world, a nursing home has this perfect sanitized area for COVID patients, and they have staff that are the top of the game and all the rest of it. In reality, it ends up spreading.
It's never worked.
Yeah. And so you have a lot of, and old people are particularly vulnerable to COVID, of course, so you end up with a lot of death. So that was the original scandal. But then Cuomo pointed out correctly that the official numbers, New York per capita actually was doing pretty well compared to the rest of the country when it came to old people dying and people in nursing homes dying. Turned out those numbers were a fabrication, and that came out earlier this year. The numbers were actually much higher. They said, well, the reason for that is because Trump was being very, very partisan about this issue, and he was threatening to investigate people, and he was politicizing it all. So we felt we needed to resist, and it's all Trump's fault. That somehow seemed adequate for a number of people. I mean, look, it was scandalous, but it wasn't nearly as scandalous as the sexual harassment.
Was it scandalous, though? I'm not sure it ever rose to meet the standard of scandal.
Look, you're probably right. All I'm saying is that it was a news story. It wasn't just ProPublica. It was a news story. It got around a bit, but then it was starting to die down. Then we had these sexual harassment claims. First one was a woman called Lindsay Boylan. She was a long-time staffer of Cuomo who said he was harassed her about her looks for a long time, compared her to one of his ex-girlfriends. She said that... quote, "We were in his New York City office on 3rd Avenue at a meeting. As I got up to leave and walk towards an open door, he stepped in front of me and kissed me on the lips. I was in shock, but I kept walking. Also, apparently he wanted to play strip poker with her on a plane." She had a few other that's an interesting image. She had a few other claims. Then there was Charlotte Bennett, who was number 2, who also worked for Andrew Cuomo. She was called in Cuomo's office to take dictation. After she was done, he turned off her tape recorder. And then, quote, he explains at that point that he's looking for a girlfriend. He's lonely, he's tired. He asked if I had trouble being with someone because of my trauma. He then went on to ask, because she was raped. He then went on to ask how she felt about age differences in relationships, and that he told her he was fine dating anyone over 22. She's 25. And she said, "I thought he's trying to sleep with me. The governor is trying to sleep with me. I can't believe it." She didn't like that. So she complained and she got transferred. Number 3 was a woman called Anna Rush. And I'll be honest, this one to me seems less serious than the other ones.
Yes.
She's not employed by him for a start. She is at a wedding. She was like a journalist at a wedding. And she went up to Cuomo to thank him for his kind words about her friends. But then Cuomo put his hand on her bare lower back. She had like a strapless dress or something. I don't know. Bare lower back. And he said, and then she removed his hand, and she said the governor remarked she seemed aggressive, and he placed his hands on her cheeks. He then asked if he could kiss her. loudly enough for a friend standing nearby to hear. She pulled away, and that was the end of that. She said, I was so confused and shocked and embarrassed. And there's a photo showing that she's indeed confused, shocked and embarrassed. So it's the actual perfect photo to illustrate that she was not very happy. My view on that, by the way, is that he's obviously a sleazy flirt.
Yes.
But to me, that's a kind of grey area. Like, you should be allowed to flirt at a wedding, I think.
Yeah.
I don't, but I think you should be allowed to.
Whether that constituted flirting or an unwanted advance, this is another question.
I know. And you go, and he would say, I asked her for consent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, after you touched her cheeks and after you touched her back. Whatever. To me, the first two are just slam the book. You're in trouble, mate. You can't go around propositioning your staff.
No.
But I should say, by the way, as well with no, keep on going. So then Cuomo held a press conference. I think a pretty good press conference, actually, to be fair. I think, like he said some things that he probably needed to say, like this.
I now understand that I acted in a way that made people feel uncomfortable. It was unintentional, and I truly and deeply apologize for it. I feel awful about it, and frankly, I am embarrassed by it. And that's not easy to say, but that's the truth.
So, like, he's taking responsibility, which is important, I think.
Sort of.
Yeah. Like he's saying, I didn't mean it, but I mean, you don't expect him to say, I meant it.
No, you don't.
But to him to say, actually, yes, I did make those people uncomfortable, and I'm sorry about that. I think that's the least you can do in that circumstance. But then there's more. There was a fourth one, Karen Hinton, who said in 2000, Cuomo called her to his dimly lit hotel room and he hugged her twice. She said the hugs were very long, too tight, too intimate. She's married. She pulled away. He pulled her back for another intimate embrace. I thought at that moment it could lead to a kiss. It could lead to other things. So I just pulled away again and I left. And multiple people have confirmed that she said it to them shortly after it occurred in 2000.
Contemporaneous report.
Yes. Yep. With one friend stating that Hinton was really creeped out. It really freaked her out. And that's in 2000, when the standards were probably lower than they are now.
Yes.
Cuomo's office has returned by referring to her as a known antagonist of the governor's who is attempting to take advantage of this moment to score cheap points with made-up allegations from 21 years ago. That's a different attitude to what he showed in his press conference.
So,
and he's, wait. And hugs and kisses are just what people in politics do. That's also a different attitude to the press conference.
Well, yeah. I mean, it is with babies, but why is this happening now? My feeling, these are historical allegations. They're coming out now. The stuff in the nursing homes is not historical. What has changed, I think, from a media standpoint, for them to get traction and for more people to come forward is the end of Trump. Before that, there was a real feeling, especially in liberal New York media, who, to be fair, have reported some of this quite aggressively, that if you ran with especially the nursing home material to its full extent, it would somehow exonerate Trump's handling of the coronavirus. And I think as well, there's something temperamental in this as well, which is that Democrats desperately wanted a kind of counter Trump. They wanted a male bully specifically, and they were never going to find that person in Joe Biden. They were desperate enough for
it. Pete Buttigieg.
Or Pete Buttigieg. They were desperate enough for it that they were kicking the tires of people like Michael Avenatti.
Yes.
That's a name you haven't heard in a while.
Oh, God.
He was talked about as a presidential contender
Yes, I
just
remember.
because he was willing to kind of act like a bit of a mensch on cable TV. And Cuomo is the best that they can do as a kind of cable TV mensch. It's funny when you look, I mean, it's half funny. If you look back immediately before these allegations, right? Cuomo's writing a book.
Yes.
Where, I mean, he's published a book.
Yeah.
Which is
Lessons from COVID.
Which is about how well
Yes.
he's handled the COVID crisis.
Yes.
And there was a specially commissioned artwork, I'm not sure if it was by the city or the state of New York,
We talked about this on our last podcast, yes.
showing him as this kind of archangel
Yes.
saving the city.
Yes.
I mean, this shows the desperation for this counterpuncher that they thought they had in him.
And so do you think that's the reason why the nursing home story never got more traction?
I think that is part of it. I think as well, worldwide, for whatever reason, very few political leaders have paid a penalty for managing coronavirus poorly. Look at Boris Johnson. The UK just did a hopeless job. And he's riding high in the polls, as they say.
Yes.
It seems like people sort of ascribe it to an act of God, and they can't bring themselves to vote for a Republican in New York, no matter how many people he's caused problems for.
So do you think that the sexual harassment allegations again played more as a makeup for...
No, I think that those are probably overdue. The timing of any Me Too story is uncertain because it's just reliant on the right... I mean, look at Bill Cosby. People were making jokes about Bill Cosby. People were making allegations about Bill Cosby years before it got this kind of snowball effect happening.
Yeah, I reckon there's probably an element as well that everyone really hates Andrew Cuomo.
Well, they do.
At least in New York. Yeah. And so,
New York hates all of its leaders.
That's true.
They're all quite hateful for whatever reason.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the fact he's refusing to resign because there's now 5 accusers. He's lashed out at critics. He's said that it's anti-democratic for him to resign.
Nice try.
He says, I was elected by the people of the state. I wasn't elected by politicians. It's an interesting contrast with Cuomo when Brooklyn Assemblyman Vito Lopez was accused of sexual harassment back in 2012. And Cuomo's spokesperson put out a statement on Cuomo's behalf. I assume Cuomo approved, saying sexual harassment in the workplace cannot be tolerated in any shape or form. These are serious allegations, and if true, the governor believes he should resign.
Well, this is also the Trump effect, isn't it? Just post through it.
Yeah. Yeah, and well, to be fair, it's not as Trump. Let's remember Ralph Northam, a.k.a. Coon Man. I think everyone remembers that he had an alleged blackface photo in his yearbook. They forget the photo of him that very much was Ralph Northam. No doubt, photo of Ralph Northam with underneath it the name Coon Man in inverted commas. That was his nickname, Coon Man.
Wasn't he dissuaded in the press conference that he gave to deal with these allegations, true allegations, that he had worn blackface? Wasn't his original plan
Yes. I know what you're about to say, yes.
to moonwalk?
Yes. Yes.
And apparently he was emphatic about the fact that he was going to moonwalk, and somehow this would demonstrate what?
He was trying to say it wasn't me who was blackface in that photo because I've only gone blackface once, and it was to dress up as Michael Jackson in a talent show, and I moonwalked. I can prove it to you. I'll show you by moonwalking now.
He was trying to say it don't matter if you're black or white.
Yeah. His wife was saying, "Not now, dear. Not now."
I mean, it would have been great.
It will.
No, it wouldn't have been great for him if it had happened. But
the point is, he stood firm despite all this, and he's now quite popular in Virginia. Virginia.
Well,
yeah.
This goes back to what we were saying before.
Yeah.
There are just so many variables on cancellation. It's a bit of a lucky dip. I mean, we've got another governor who physically assaulted a journalist.
Yeah.
He body slammed the Guardian reporter.
And he took offence at being called Neanderthal. This was in response to the Biden calling, referring to Neanderthal thinking when it comes to removing COVID restrictions. You're talking about Greg Gianforte.
Yes.
Greg Gianforte took great offence at Biden referring to that thinking as Neanderthal thinking.
Well, that was them having some fun. Didn't Marco Rubio say this is offensive to the 5% of people who have Neanderthal DNA?
Yeah, but I mean, that was obviously a joke.
Yeah.
But I don't think Greg Gianforte was joking. I don't think. Oh, actually, look, I was going to talk about COVID in Texas. I'm going to talk about that with Dave, but I will just share with you the best quote of all about this, which was from Dan Patrick, the deputy governor, however they call them in Texas. Here we are. Look, I hope everybody's realised by now these that's the original. This is Dan Patrick's comment. Neanderthal would come to the president very quickly because if you look up the definition of Neanderthal, it says Neanderthals were hunter-gatherers. And of course, that would be the name of his son, Hunter, who gathers millions for his family from countries around the world.
I love it when they do stuff like that.
Good call, Dan. Anyway, go on.
That's a very, very long walk to put the burn on someone, isn't it?
But yes, you're saying.
I was thinking about there's an example of people trying this stuff on and pretending to be offended. There's a funny sort of attempted inverted cancellation, which got very little traction a few years ago, which is with the Church of Scientology. And we all know that at the very top level of the Church of Scientology, you find out about how, the souls of people were put into volcanoes and they flew up into the air and there's alien spaceships and it's all a load of nonsense, right? And the Church of Scientology, in a few interviews, it didn't stick. When this was brought up, the spokesperson would just say, "This is extremely offensive to my religious beliefs." That you are discussing this sacred knowledge. That's a nice try.
Yeah. But back to what you're saying about the brazening out the Trump effect. It is true that this is becoming a thing, that politicians are just... Yeah. Which is, and if ever there's a place where it shouldn't apply, it's New York. Because as you said, normally it's a case of, well, we've got to stick with our guy, because if we don't, they're going to be replaced by the other guy. But Ralph Northam, if he resigned, there would have been a Republican who would have taken over.
There's not going to be a Republican in New York.
No, there isn't. So if ever there's a disposable governor, this is the one. But which is why they're all coming out to call for him to resign as well. But he's not. And so where does that take us?
I don't know. And people have drawn this example locally in Australia and in other countries as well. If you look at what people resign for in the 60s and 70s, it's just another planet.
Yes.
The appearance of impropriety, even here, Barry O'Farrell resigning over a bottle of wine, we're not going to see that again.
No, we're not. even if the wine has blackface. I will add this though, which is that this has got nothing to do with anything really, but just when I was researching this topic to talk about it, I just happened to come across an old Joe Biden gaffe. This is completely irrelevant to this story, but this is I've never seen before, so you probably haven't as well. This is Joe Biden from 2012. Okay. Being asked something about Indians. And,
oh dear.
This
is always a dangerous area this has tripped up Prince Philip several times.
Yeah, and Joe Biden himself has a bit of form with Indians, but this is an excellent clip. Here we go.
even call centers, which rushed overseas in the hundreds of thousands. How many times you get the call? I'd like to talk to you about your credit card, okay? Or that ad on TV. What is it, Nancy? This is Nancy. Can I talk to a supervisor, right?
So he gets halfway through his impression of an Indian.
He started doing brown voice.
Yeah, and then suddenly goes, you can see it suddenly hit him going, this is not a good idea.
Yeah.
And he just stops and they just go back to normal.
In the
How good is that?
In the US parlance, there's a flag on the play.
I love that. But look, I just a couple of quick things with Cuomo as well I want to add, which is that for those who are sympathetic towards Cuomo, I don't know if there are any, that
this one's for the Cuomo fans.
There's a few things where even if you think his press conference was great, there was lying going on there. Like, for instance, he initially, even before the press conference, he denied Lindsay Boylan's claims. He said Miss Boylan's claims of inappropriate behaviour are quite simply false, and there's simply no truth to these claims, before he then realised he was in trouble when there was a second and there was a third, and then he held his press conference and was going, I'm sorry to everyone. But also, there's this.
At the time that I was making anyone feel uncomfortable, I never knew at the time I was making anyone feel uncomfortable.
Remember, Charlotte Bennett complained at the time. She didn't just complain once, she complained twice. She complained to his chief of staff and his chief counsel. And she was transferred immediately, as if he didn't know. So that's just a lie. That's just a flat-out lie. And he also said that he also said in the press conference that when they asked him if he'd taken the sexual harassment course, a state sexual harassment course, said, quote, the short answer is yes, which is a very squirrely kind of answer. And then straight after that, Charlotte Bennett in her interview said that Cuomo had someone else take his course for him. She actually overheard them talking about it, and that
they got a ring-in in.
Yeah, and then he signed off as if he'd taken it himself.
That's such a strange thing to do. I guess just to get some guy to go and do it.
Oh no, I think it was his secretary or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was one of his staffers did it for him, and he just signed it because he just thought it was beneath him, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
But yeah, he's just arrogant, which seems to be the thing with Andrew Cuomo. But anyway, so I should say as well that the nursing home thing, before we forget, remember how I said that they blamed it all on Trump? It turns out that they started covering it up long before Trump talked about it.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, they actually started covering it up in July, so that's bullshit as well. So there's a lot of lying going on.
It's interesting that they did have. It's not a very persuasive defense, but it's more persuasive than lying. It does involve admission, which is to say, well, New York had first mover disadvantage. This is the first. It's going to hit harder in a big city. It's going to hit harder. That means hit harder in a blue city. We don't know how to handle it yet. Mistakes are going to be made.
Yeah, but if you do that, you can't write a book about it.
No, you can't.
Which he began writing just before the cover-up started, interestingly. Do you have anything to add about Chris Cuomo? Because you know what I'm talking about there?
Yeah.
Yeah, because Chris had him on this show quite a lot.
Well, this is unseemly, isn't it? And this is another reason why he's able to position himself as the cable bad boy of democratic politics.
Yeah.
Is because his own brother has assisted in that image making.
To be fair, what his brother said just now was, I had him on before there were any real accountability questions during COVID, when I strongly identified and felt a need for people to be able to connect with things that were familiar and gave them a sense of hope. Yeah.
I don't understand how you can have that scenario. If you're going to pretend, right, that the media's job is to create accountability for politicians, if you have that kind of relationship, it's impossible to even pretend.
You say that, but I want you to see Chris Cuomo pretend, because I think he does a good job of it, of staying kind of neutral, like a journalist should. This was in June 25, okay, and I'll play the clip now, and I'll read you the caption for the clip,
okay,
because he tweeted this clip out. All right, New York had and has June 25, by the way, was the week after the story came out about the nursing home deaths. As far as accountability goes, New York had and has its struggles, but they're doing way better than what we see elsewhere, and no way that happens without the Love Gov dishing the real 24/7. He works with relentless intensity, and New York's better for it. And as a brother, I am proud. Now, to be fair, he didn't say what he was dishing out that was real, like when he said dishing out the real. So there's different ways there's different nouns you could insert there.
Look,
I want to play the clip.
He's right that there are worse things going on than COVID.
This is the clip. That he tweeted out. So see if you feel he's pretending well here.
I just hope you recognize what even I'm able to recognize, being spawned from the same wolf pack. I hope you are able to appreciate what you did in your state and what it means for the rest of the country now, and what it will always mean to those who love and care about you the most. I'm wowed by what you did, and more importantly, I'm wowed by how you did it. This was very hard. I know it's not over, but obviously I love you as a brother. Obviously I'll never be objective. Obviously I think you're the best politician in the country. But I hope you feel good about what you did for your people, because I know they appreciate it. Nothing's perfect. You'll have your critics.
Thank you.
But I've never seen anything like what you did, and that's why I'm so happy to have had you on the show. And I hope you know that.
Do you think he's pretending well there?
Just give me a moment, please.
I like the way Andrew Cuomo is having trouble getting a word in during the tongue bath. he's trying to move it on, but no, Chris has got more to say. Yeah.
I mean, that feels primitive, doesn't it? That feels like dynastic kind of politics of a pre-modern age.
Yeah. Fair.
The Love Gov. He probably shouldn't have called
The
him
Love
that.
Gov, yeah.
That's a bit of a poison chalice.
It does have a different connotation now, doesn't it? Do you have anything else to add about anything, Rich? Because we're kind of out of time.
You should tell people to watch your TV show again.
Yeah, you should watch my show. It's called Planet America. it's on Friday
You're
night.
so reluctant.
On ABC News.
You're so reluctant to tell people to watch it.
I've tried to do it a couple of times, and it always feels tacky and shit. So
why? It's a good show.
Yeah.
And if we talk about a graph,
you've already admitted you don't watch it.
But when I have watched it, it's been very good. It's not that, the reason that I don't watch it has nothing to do with the quality.
Sure. That's okay.
I'm in a detox from US politics most of the time now.
That's okay. We've fulfilled the role. We've fulfilled. I've done my plug. Play America. It's on 8:00 on Friday night. There we go. You should plug something though. Do you have something to plug? You got something coming out? I know you're writing a book, but you're not supposed to talk about that yet, are you?
No, I can. If anyone has any tips, good tips for me about Wikipedia, because I'm writing a cultural history of Wikipedia.
That's right. I was hoping that you're actually writing a book about Wikipedia, not you just in your spare time and just hanging around Wikipedia a lot. You want some tips for having an awesome editor.
What do you mean hanging around Wikipedia a lot? Like The Office? They can. My Twitter handle is RG Cooke. Actually, I'm going to send people to my website.
Yeah, I didn't even know you had a website.
Yeah, neither did I. I'm even worse at plugging my website than you are at plugging your show. It's richardcooke.com, and that is CWOKE.com. I'm just looking for things about Wikipedia that I might have missed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'm going to mention is I've started this tradition recently of just plugging a couple of, because I don't plug my show, plugging a couple of articles I read recently, which I thought were interesting. And I saw one which was very interesting about the travel ban, like AKA the Muslim ban, suggesting that maybe getting rid of it wasn't such a crash-shot idea. And the reason why, I don't want to spoil the article, but essentially saying what the Muslim ban began as was very different to how it ended up after 3 encounters with the Supreme Court. And how it ended up at the end was actually a reasonable policy that that was well executed. But it never beat the rap from
Well, yeah.
from the original sin.
I mean, that is a long road to rehabilitation.
Yeah, and so now they got rid of it, of course, as soon as Joe Biden came in. And this article suggesting maybe it's a shame, like because the final policy ended up being a pretty good policy. You can read it and you can make up your own mind. But the other thing I want to ask you about, Rich, very quickly before we go, was an article suggesting it's not a great article. It's just the concept. The concept is that Jon Stewart has a lot to... It basically attributes to Jon Stewart the death of Crossfire, the TV show. Because
Yes.
Jon Stewart went on the Crossfire and he said, "You're hurting America.
Yep.
You guys are pathetic. Stop it." And then a few months later, it was axed, essentially. Like, he dunked on them, and he dunked so hard, it was the end of the show. This article was suggesting it's in the Federalist. It's kind of a bad article. But the concept I found interesting, which is to say, let's fast forward 15 years. There are no TV shows with a conservative and a liberal talking to each other. There are just liberals talking amongst themselves and conservatives talking amongst themselves in their own silos. And don't you wish, in hindsight, that we still had shows, even if they're trash, the shows existed where conservatives and liberals actually talked to each other and debated each other? Wouldn't that be nice, in hindsight?
Even if just to relieve some pressure.
Yeah.
And
I think it's a fair point, to be honest. Yeah.
It seems like even the Punch and Judy show was a better version than nothing.
Yeah.
I think that's, I half believe that.
Anyway, both those articles are in the homework. If you look in the blurb, it's right there. Richard Cooke, thank you very much for podding.
Chaz Licciardello, it was my pleasure. It was my joy. Thank you.
See you guys on Friday. Bye-bye.